This administration is profoundly evil in ways that are difficult for Americans to comprehend. Now, the problem is he's back.
Yeah.
And I'm convinced that even if the American people get their act together on him, and they're starting to realize that. I mean, there was this great article, I hate to say great article. We have reached a stage of illegality, immorality, and depravity in a federal administration that no one could have ever thought.
Trump completely lost it on Twitter after George Conway, his vocal critic, dropped some major bombs about his marriage on national TV. The former president went off the rails, calling Conway a husband from hell, while Conway remained as calm as ever, systematically tearing down Trump's reputation piece by piece. Curious about what Conway said that set Trump off so badly? It all had to do with Trump's so-called reverse Midas touch, the idea that everything he touches turns into garbage instead of gold. And folks, the receipts Conway brought to that interview had Trump shaking in his expensive suit. Before we dive deeper, do me a quick favor. If you're enjoying this content, please take a second to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch these videos without subscribing, and subscribing costs you nothing but helps us out immensely. So, did you click that subscribe button? Awesome, thanks so much. Now let's get back to it. Ever wonder what happens when a top-tier lawyer decides to take apart a former president on live TV? Well, George Conway just showed us, and let's just say Donnie Diapers wasn't too thrilled about it.
It's a cult. I mean, that's the only way you can describe it. And everyone has, it consists of basically two groups of people, mostly. I mean, that's basically what just happened here with Nikki Haley. And the person who has really lost it the most is Donald Trump. Some people who have basically completely lost it, the people we see in the House of Representatives. And then there are people who are basically afraid to call out.
Conway didn't go for the usual wild accusations or angry outbursts like many of Trump's critics. Oh no, he took the approach that drives Trump absolutely insane: calm, rational analysis. It was like watching a surgeon skillfully cut through Trump's orange facade, revealing the decaying mess beneath, all while keeping his composure on live TV. There sat Conway, cool as a cucumber, speaking in measured tones that made his points land even harder. He didn't need to scream or flail his arms around. Instead, he meticulously broke down Trump's narcissistic behaviors and epic business failures, doing so with the kind of precision that only someone who truly knows what they're talking about could manage.
I think, generally speaking, not in every single case, less government is better than more, because you don't want too powerful a government, because you may not like the next government. A disease of liberalism in the 60s and 70s, when I came of political age, and now it's a horrible metastasis in the right that would say that, oh, well, let's see, in order to figure out whether this particular gun regulation is constitutional under the Second Amendment, we have to look very specifically at the statutes that were passed in Maryland in 1645.
What made Conway's approach so potent was how he methodically documented Trump's so-called reverse Midas touch. Instead of everything he touches turning to gold, it's turning to garbage. The lawyer, calm and collected, started listing Trump's biggest failures as if it were a simple grocery list. There were casinos that tanked, despite gambling being essentially a license to print money, a university that was as fake as Trump's hair color, and airlines that crashed harder than Trump's diet plan. And then Conway hit Trump with the knockout punch, pointing out with perfect delivery who loses money running a casino. It's literally a business where people hand you their money willingly. How do you screw that up?
He's the crazy one, and everybody is getting more crazy than he is. And as Nikki Haley pointed out when she was telling the truth for a couple of weeks in the spring, I mean, say it's 74, 75 degrees, he's saying it's freezing. He's the lies about the election. He's mentally unstable, and he's getting worse. And we can see it every day in the courthouse. We can see it when he's standing out there complaining about the temperature when thermometers in the courtroom.
Conway took aim at Trump's relationship with the truth with one of the sharpest analogies imaginable. He likened him to a Matryoshka doll of lies. He lies about lying, then lies about lying about lying. It wasn't just a sick burn. It was a deep psychological insight into how Trump's mind operates, coming from someone who clearly understands the inner workings of a deceitful mind. But perhaps the most biting moment was when Conway tackled Trump's emotional depth, or lack thereof. Instead of lashing out, he calmly observed that Trump seems to lack empathy or a conscience, treating people as objects rather than human beings. And that wasn't just another partisan swipe. These were objective, clinical observations coming from a respected conservative attorney, and they hit much harder than any political jab ever could. It was clear these truths were far too real for Trump to comfortably digest.
I believe that even if things turn around publicly, I don't think they're going to turn around publicly fast enough to prevent some of the bad things that I think are going to happen. And the administration did in a whole bunch of agencies was fire en masse the probationary employees. And I don't remember exactly how long you're a probationary employee when you're hired, but it has to be individualized. They did not do that because they just fired everybody en masse. They pretend that, oh yes, we made a determination, but that's it's bullshit.
Conway's delivery was a masterclass in precision. For every criticism of Trump, he backed it up with concrete examples, specific dates, figures, and the consequences of Trump's failures. He didn't need to shout or sling childish insults, though let's be honest, that could have been fun too. Instead, he just methodically presented the facts with the cold precision of a skilled litigator who knows how to craft a flawless case. But here's what really stung Trump. Conway wasn't just some random Democrat or liberal critic lobbing attacks from the sidelines. He had once been in serious consideration for high-ranking roles in Trump's own Justice Department. A lifelong Republican, Conway had even helped argue a Supreme Court case against Bill Clinton. Plus, he's married to Kellyanne Conway, one of Trump's closest advisors. This wasn't a partisan assault. It was a well-placed blow from within the conservative legal establishment, a reminder of how deep the cracks really go.
Donald Trump, it's just ingrained in him. He wants retribution against his enemies. And by picking two people who are completely loyal to him, all this stuff, it's just these are the two perfect people to run an FBI that's controlled by a president who's a criminal. Spread his disinformation about January 6th and about Spygate even back in 2016. That's what Bongino got on the radar screen for, and COVID, which Bongino got thrown off of YouTube for permanently.
As Conway methodically deconstructed Trump's business record, psychological profile, and leadership failures, you could almost hear the alarms blaring from Mar-a-Lago. Trump can dismiss attacks from Democrats as fake news, but how does he discredit a respected Republican lawyer who's simply laying out irrefutable facts about his bankruptcies and failed businesses? What made Conway's takedown so effective wasn't the typical mudslinging. It was his surgical precision in revealing the consistent failures that Trump has spent his entire career trying to conceal. Trump has based his entire persona on being a winner and a successful businessman, but Conway expertly peeled back the layers of that facade, doing so without raising his voice or appearing the least bit emotional. This kind of factual analysis, paired with the credibility of someone within the conservative establishment, hit Trump hard. The reaction from the former president was pure panic. When someone who's built their identity on winning gets their life's work dissected by a respected attorney, it exposes vulnerabilities that even Trump's loyal staff couldn't hide. It didn't take long for Trump to lash out. After Conway's measured takedown went viral, Trump, in classic fashion, ignored any factual rebuttal and dove straight into childish name-calling. A total loser and husband from hell were just the opening volleys on Twitter. When reporters asked him about Conway's remarks, Trump escalated, calling him a whack job and accusing Conway of being jealous of his wife's success. The contrast was jarring. While Conway presented a calm, fact-based analysis of Trump's failures, Trump's response was that of a petulant child whose favorite toy had just been snatched away. It was like watching a chess master make a brilliant move, only for his opponent to flip the board and claim victory. And of course, Trump's campaign manager, Brad Parscale, couldn't resist jumping into the fray, claiming that Conway's comments were rooted in bitterness over not landing a job in the Justice Department. But that talking point crumbled faster than Trump's casinos when it came to light that Conway had actually received a rejection letter from Trump's team.
We have 600 plus federal judges trying to run the federal government through litigation. When the president is just refusing to do his job, and not only refusing to do his job, basically saying F you to the duties that I have, where you have a majority of both houses of Congress who absolutely have refused in the past, in prior Congresses, to hold this executive in his prior administration to account. They're refusing to. The correct solution, and this is what made JV laugh, and you guys put it up on the internet, what JV laughing at me, the correct solution that the framers intended was impeachment and removal when a president refuses to do his job.
Conway's dissection of Trump was a thing of calculated precision, and Trump's response was like watching a toddler try to argue with a college professor. It wasn't just a random personal attack from George Conway. It was a well-reasoned, fact-driven analysis that made Trump look like an amateur in a game that was supposed to be his own. Conway didn't come out swinging wildly. Instead, he used clear, irrefutable examples of Trump's failures and psychological flaws to paint a picture of a man utterly unfit for office. Trump's response, on the other hand, was predictably juvenile. He resorted to name-calling and low blows instead of actually addressing the points Conway made. He called Conway a husband from hell, which only exposed his inability to engage with real criticism. It was like watching someone who had just been caught red-handed trying to shift the conversation to something trivial and personal. But what made this particularly shocking was that Conway wasn't some random Democrat throwing jabs. He was a lifelong Republican who had been deep in Trump's circle, even considered for positions in Trump's administration. This wasn't just an outsider's opinion. It was insider information coming from someone who had seen firsthand the destructive tendencies of the man in charge. As Conway dissected Trump's business history, he exposed the so-called reverse Midas touch, where everything Trump touches turns to failure: casinos, airlines, universities, you name it. Conway's calm, collected approach made the truth hit harder, like a surgeon carefully pointing out every organ failure without ever raising his voice. And all the while, Trump's responses became more desperate and increasingly personal as he deflected every serious accusation with insults and baseless claims. The real kicker came when Conway spoke about Trump's emotional state, pointing out that Trump lacks any empathy or self-awareness, and that his only response to failure is to lash out. This wasn't just an opinion, it was a clinical observation of someone who had worked close to the man and seen the damage firsthand. Conway's analysis wasn't about partisan politics either. It was about a man who was emotionally and mentally incapable of being held accountable for his actions. The irony? Trump responded with the maturity of a toddler, calling Conway names rather than addressing any of the facts Conway presented. This is where the real damage was done. Not only did Conway's calm, fact-based approach expose Trump's failings, but it also made Trump's reaction scream louder than any of his tweets. Conway's ability to stay composed and rational while pointing out Trump's numerous shortcomings was what made the former president's response seem even more unhinged. And let's not forget the impact this had on Trump's team. They had no idea how to defend against someone who had worked alongside them for years. Trump's reaction was to lash out with childish insults, and his team could only scramble to explain it away. Conway had effectively cornered him, and every personal attack Trump made only highlighted his inability to handle any form of real scrutiny. What made this whole episode even more fascinating was that Conway wasn't just calling out Trump's political behavior. He was giving us a window into the inner workings of the Trump administration, showing us just how disconnected the former president was from the reality of the country he governed. And as Conway continued to speak out, the stakes got higher, not just for Trump's image, but for the future of American democracy itself. As Conway laid out the facts and pointed to the psychological damage Trump had inflicted on his own followers, Trump's inability to process these criticisms became all too apparent. It wasn't about politics anymore, it was about the fundamental flaws in a man who thought he could rule through sheer force of personality alone. Conway's critiques weren't just about what Trump did wrong, they exposed who he was as a person, and that's what made Trump's response so telling. What's most revealing here isn't the attack, but Trump's defense, or lack thereof. Each time Conway offered a factual counterpoint, Trump's response was to attack the messenger, not the message. It's a pattern Trump has followed his whole life, but Conway's calm, methodical approach was something Trump couldn't counter. And the more Trump reacted with anger, the more his inability to deal with real critique became obvious. What made Conway's takedown so effective wasn't just the content of his criticism, but the way he delivered it, with precision, with evidence, and with the confidence of someone who knew he was telling the truth. It's that confidence that made Trump's rant seem all the more desperate and unhinged. For once, it was Trump who couldn't hold it together, and Conway who had the upper hand. The biggest takeaway from this entire exchange is that Conway's message wasn't just about exposing Trump's failures, but about showing the American public that someone who has been so adept at lying and manipulating the system is finally being held accountable. And it's not just coming from the left, it's coming from within his own party, from someone who knows how the system works and who's seen firsthand how Trump has damaged it. What Trump never understood is that Conway's words weren't just insults, they were a warning that even within the ranks of his most loyal supporters, the cracks were starting to show. And when a conservative lawyer like George Conway speaks out, the message resonates far beyond the political divide. Trump's tantrums and insults are just a smokescreen to cover up the real story, a man who was never qualified for the role he held and who still can't handle the truth about his failures.